Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Harsha. So in this meeting, we want to go through what's coming in 0.9 at a high level. So there are a few major features that we're shipping in 0.9, which is data collaboration. We shipped activity feeds before, but if you look at the activity feeds, it's mostly around the change events that are happening in your metadata, right? Someone goes and updated the description, someone changed the schema, all of those becomes activity feed as well as events within the system. And we are kind of displaying that in the landing page when the user logs in. So this is great. You can see at one place what's all going in your metadata system, and get informed about the changes that's happening. But where we want to take it to next level is to add collaboration aspects such that other users can actually participate in this discussion. Let's say I went ahead and changed the description to something else. Suresh or Alberto or someone else can say that, hey, Arshad, can you actually update the description this way? So that we want to enable comments and requests for descriptions and other things in this upcoming release. Secondly is the data quality. We were shipping the profiler and metrics like a standard metrics before. But where we want to take to the next level is to allow users to figure out which tables should be profiled and what are the metrics you want to collect, because you as a consumer or a producer are much more aware of, hey, I want this total quantity should never be zero. I want to make sure I want to collect the metrics around that. And then we also allow users to write their own custom queries to define what are these metrics about. Lastly, data quality itself. You can actually provide expressions around these metrics to run test and alert yourselves through events and whatnot. So we'll go through that as well. Lastly, there is glossary support. This is one of the frequently asked supports that we keep getting from the community. We are working on that, adding in 0.9 as well. So we'll go through quickly on the mocks that we built for glossary as well as what's coming in. So without that, Vivek, do you want to go first and kind of talk about the activity feeds and comments?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Asha. Let me share my screen. Can I share my screen?
Can you try now?
Yeah. So like Harsha mentioned, this is the epic that we'll be tracking all the issues related to the collaboration activity threads. And here are some of the mocks that we are working on. So this is a mock-up or a wireframe of how the landing page, the home page will look like after we have this collaboration feature. So today we only have a single line of posts where users cannot comment or collaborate on any change event that happens in the system. But with the collaboration threads feature, users should be able to reply and post replies to any of the change event that they see in the homepage. They can also create a new post like this, and they should be able to tag any data entity or any user and create the question or collaborate like this in the homepage. So there are multiple places where users will get access to this collaboration feature. So one is this homepage where they can also filter by their own data. This my data is a filter that will show only feeds related to the data that the user owns. And this following is something where when the user gets mentioned by some other user in some of the data entities or in some other places. So this following filter will give them only feeds related to those entities. And there are other places where we also see.
Vivek, can you quickly show the current sandbox and and then this page is how the current sandbox page is changing, right? So
yeah, sure. All right, so this is our current landing page with the activity, and we don't have any ability to comment on this particular change event. And this is where we are going. So with the collaboration thread feature, users should be able to comment on any of these events and start a thread from here. And it will not just be here, but also, let's say, for example, okay, this one doesn't have a description, and I am not the owner to edit this description. So in this case, I should be able to request a description against, to the owner. So we will add the user experience in such a way that the users can request description from here for this whole schema, and they can also request description for each of these columns here. And that will start a new thread, and they can also suggest a description from the thread, and the owner can come and add a description, and we will get all of those updates in that threaded conversation. So let's take a look at the wireframe for that particular feature here. Yeah, so like we saw in the sandbox, we will also add a new tab called activity feed, where they can track all the conversation happening related to that whole field. Like for example, here, there is a conversation thread with this description with 12 replies. And there are also a couple of conversation threads around the columns. So when the user clicks on this activity feed, the user should be able to see all of these conversations related to this particular entity, which is the raw order table under Shopify. And so these are the initial wireframes. So if you guys have any feedback or feature requests on top of this, you're always welcome to post your comments on these issues. This is still work in progress, and as I mentioned, this is the epic that we follow this feature, and it's 2366.
So bit more context on this one, right? So what usually happens in typically when you're asking for a questions around tables or columns, typically in current situation you might be asking through Slack or whatnot, right? So it's one-to-one, or even in a Teams, it's the thread that goes past by. So someone else might have the same question about what this grade cut means, what is the format, are we storing in string, or is it some other format, etc. Right? So those questions we want to capture as a knowledge within OpenMetadata. So we want to enable that conversations to happen within OpenMetadata, not just these threads and everything else. Like as the evolution goes in, as more people coming in having these collaboration aspects, you could actually pin certain aspects of the conversations into the table entity. So people who might be coming later and want to explore, hey, some of this discussion might have happened already. Where should I look at? So you can go to the table entity and activity feed. You'll get all the conversation that happened around that entity, as well as any pinned events that might happen. So this way you're encouraging your team to participate in open metadata, get the tribal knowledge out in open in the site, so that everyone else can participate and understand.
So there's a question. Is there a difference between black speech balloon and white speech balloon? I think.
Oh, so that's my superior markup skills. It just, trying to indicate that it is clicked so that the left panel is open. So yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I think in this wireframe, Harsha was trying to say that the user has clicked this conversation thread, and that is what we are seeing in this panel here. And yeah, these are initial wireframes, and we plan to have these threads show up in the right panel like this. And there will only be one level of posts. So, we cannot keep creating nested replies to any of these conversations that we see here. So
Harsha, we will see how good your wireframing skills are between what you have done here and then how the feature comes out.
The feature will be much better than the much better too. So
yeah. And like Harsha said, we also have this feature of pinning that we are going to take up. And in the activity feed, so we can pin some of the conversations as knowledge comments or knowledge threads, so that users get access to them first, and then look at all the other threaded conversations here.
I think there's a good question on the chat. When someone comments on a schema, do we notify the owners? I think that's where we are heading to. So this is not about just comments and let that kind of be conversation threads. We want allow users to turn them into tasks such that, let's say, for example, I'm part of a team. I own, in this case, raw order. My team owns raw order. Someone comes in and says, "Hey, can you add description for a column?" That can become a task, and that could be my task, and I can take a look at that and reply or update it. So that's where we are heading to nudge collaboration towards an action. So tasks are going to be important there.
So Vivek, can you go to our sandbox front, the initial page, the my data page? Alexander, that's a great question. So if you look here on the right hand side, we have my data, which is data that I own, and then there is, as a consumer of the data, our data assets, you can also follow some data assets. So the reason why we are building conversation threads in open metadata, unlike, say, possibly leveraging Slack, is in case of Slack, the main abstraction is a channel. And then there are members in a channel, and then members communicate with each other. And then when you respond back, you create a thread, right? You can have, one level thread. Now in open metadata, so essentially you are creating a thread, asking a question or providing input about some data asset. So the thread belongs to clearly the data asset. And then the data asset is owned by somebody. So it goes to the owners. And then there are followers that are following the data assets, and it goes to them. And then finally you have mentions, right? You could mention somebody else in these threads. And so the thread is also relevant to the people who are mentioned in that. So, it's like having multiple channels, right? One channel for the owner, one channel for automatically the data asset, one channel for the followers, instead of having to, only have this, I am a member of a channel and that's why I get it. No, actually you get it based on different relationship you have with the data asset. So that's the richness of, if we, when we complete this functionality, all the relevant people will be brought into the conversation and be informed.
One more question. Can we have bots joining conversations just like GitHub bots?
Absolutely. Bots are users, and bots can do some automated stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I also wanted to highlight the fact that, when there is a change happening related to this particular description, we will also notify that change as part of this thread, so that all the users in this conversation are aware of what happened. Like, for example, if Suresh requested description for this table schema, and if the owner comes back and adds a description, then that event will appear here. So that is basically like an automated event that triggers a post inside this thread that is available for all the users to take a look at this thread who follows this thread. And so that will be like a timeline. And after that, the user who originally posted this request description can come and thank the owner, and the thread can continue. So yeah, I think that's why we are going.
Any other questions, guys? I think only Alberto is asking all the questions.
For the column description changes of those threads, will we be actually up-leveling that to the table level?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at it, there was one, Vivek, you were showing a tab, right, in the table where all the conversations are.
Yeah,
there all the conversations will be available, right, irrespective of which field it was around.
Yes.
Oh, I see. So the 12 replies that you see there is only for the description, and the
Correct.
2 replies is for that column.
Correct.
But in the activity field, you'll have everything together.
Correct. You will have, 24.
Okay.
There is a question from Alexander. Will the chats also use lineage? That is, if you have a thread on a data set with a parent in the lineage, will you get notification for that as well? Will the threads follow the columns through the lineage? No, this will become, right now we are not thinking of that, but definitely Alexander, we should think about, how this would work out. Otherwise, you can have a lot of threads going, right? That is originating off of downstream or possibly from upstream to downstream, depending on the relationship. And it could get very noisy. So I think this is a feature where we will iteratively build the experience and seek the input and then continue to improve it based on what it can enable and based on, the community feedback.
Yep.
But it's an interesting thought.
Any other questions, guys?
Okay.
Right. We can move on to the next feature. I'll hand it over to Harsha.
Thanks, Vivek. Let me open up. All right, you can see my screen. So before going and talking about the data quality itself, so I want to show what we have right now, right? So you have tables in Redshift, BigQuery, Snowflake, whatnot, right? So you have a lot of data in there. While we are running the ingestion currently in pointed version, we get all the metadata about databases, tables, columns, column descriptions, constraints, and everything else that we publish to OpenMetadata. During this process, we also give an option for the users to configure what we call as data profiler enable. When that Boolean value is set to true, the ingestion also runs profile jobs on all the tables that we are fetching the data for. So what it does is it's actually collects some of the interesting metrics, such as how many are distinct in a column, and what is the null ratio. If it is an number field like integer, big int, whatnot, we collect the min, max, median, and standard deviation. We also collect a lot more metrics, like if it is a string, we are collecting what is the length of the string, what is the minimum length, what is average, what is the max length. We also calculate histograms and everything. That support is not there in UI, but we collect a lot of metrics. So this kind of gives you what's going on in your table. For example, I want to make sure the number of orders should never be negative, right? So I can look at what is the minimum value. In this case, there is at least one order going through per day, and the maximum orders are 5, right? So this will run every day, and it will kind of define your profiling of the table in a daily fashion, in a time series fashion. So we want to take this to the next level. So it's great that you can actually look at these numbers and observe how the table is doing. But there is not much usage unless you can actually create test cases around it and get alerts and be alerted. For example, row count, right? So we are also tracking the number of rows per day, and you can actually get the differences between per day how the table is growing. If there is no data happen in one day, that means either a workflow that is responsible for generating this table is failing, or some other bug must have happened, right? So you want to be notified of that. So it will be great if, as a user of this table, I can actually say that, hey, this rows should never be below, I don't know, 100 per day, right? So if that condition fails, send me a Slack notification, send me a PagerDuty, or send me an event that I can consume and act upon it. So with that, we wanted to start something called as data quality and quality metrics. So taking some more step back here. Right now, what we are saying is all the tables that you're ingesting can be enabled profile. But in some cases, you want profiling is expensive. Of course, it varies. It might, on a huge table, it might take longer. And you don't want your metadata schema pipeline to be running profiling, as it can take longer, and you want to probably schedule the metadata fetching from all these sources much faster. For example, there are detailed commands going through in your Snowflake DB. You want to capture that as soon as possible rather than combine this huge profiling job with metadata. So first step is to separation of metadata extraction and running the profiler as two different jobs. And the next thing is ability to configure profiling to only specific table instead of all the tables. So one approach we want to take here is you as an owner or admin can come to either at the database level or at the table level and say that enable profile. Once you enable profile, there are several metrics that we present to you, which is, row count, column count at the table level. Then at the column metrics, there is, unique ratio, unique count, distinct count, bunch of other things that we want to kind of provide as a standard metric, right? So as the, again, owner or admin, you can say that, hey, I only want to collect unique, variance, distinct, but I'm not really interested in histogram. I'm not really interested in min, max, average length of a string. So you can choose which metrics you want to collect the metrics for. This will allows two things, right? You are reducing the load on the database. You don't want to kind of, collecting unnecessary metrics that you probably do not have any use for. So this will give you an option to select certain metrics from the standard metrics. Now, the next thing is, this is great. You guys are providing all these standard metrics, but I want to provide some kind of a business context to these metrics that I'm collecting. Like what is standard metrics is doing is, just looking at the table ratios and calculating min, max, median. These are great, but what does actually mean for your business, for your table in this use case? For example, number of orders 1 and 5 is great, but is it really a metric that will be useful for you to track the quality of the table? Probably not. You could probably write a SQL statement saying, hey, number of orders grouped by per date and per region should be greater than X amount of time. That is a condition that you can express with this new custom metric. So you'll provide a definition, you can create a name, you can give us a SQL statement like this. In this case, an example is select number of count, order ID from orders group, and group it by order date. You can make it as complex as you need to be. You can also create a join here and and connect two different data sets that are symbolically linked. For example, orders and sales could be something that you want to combine and generate a metric for it. Once you define that, the profiling job then not only collect the standard metrics that we are defined here, it also start collecting your custom metric as well, right? And SQL metric is great, but you might have another tool that you're already running in your company, and you want to just generate a generic metric. I would just want a key value pair, where in this case, I'm going to put email validity percentage. Let's say there is a column called email. How many of those columns are actually following the email format, right? Some of them are, just plain strings, doesn't have @, doesn't have .com or whatnot. So you can create those validations on your side and send us the metric. So the two things that's happening here is SQL will allow you to kind of write your own metric, let the OpenMetadata profiling take care of generating that metric. And the last one is custom generic metric, which is the tool that you already have generating certain metrics. You want to publish to OpenMetadata, not just to showcase the metrics that you're collecting to the users of OpenMetadata, but also create alerts and everything else in OpenMetadata. So that's the idea behind the quality metrics. I'm going to take a pause here and wait for any questions you may have.
Will we tie these metrics back into the activity, as in if a major change happens or if the metric test actually fails?
Yeah, so I'll come to that test failing and everything else, but any changes to the entity, like you define a new thing, new metric in the table, you change the metric scope or SQL statement or everything that's happening to an entity in OpenMetadata is generating a change version, and which eventually generate an event as well that will land in activity feed or anywhere else that you would like to subscribe to.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now moving on to the next step. So great, I have amazing metrics, quality metrics that I'm collecting, but what is the use of those quality metrics if someone comes in, looks at the UI? So that's where the data quality aspect comes into play. This is a schema that is evolving, so please give us a comments on how you would like to see. These are some of the early thoughts on these things. So as a user, you could say that, hey, I'm going to come to customers table and I want to create a alert. If the rows goes below 100 per day, I want to be alerted. So you can say, click on here and provide an expression like this. Row count should always be greater than 1,000 per day. and enable that as a test. And the test results will be look something like that. So it executed. So whenever you're creating this test, we will be asking how often you want to run this test. For a row count, a decent value would be like per day, right? Again, it depends on your cadence of your ETL jobs and everything else. Then we capture those results in a time series fashion. What is execution time? What is the status? What is the actual value? So in case if it is fail, you will also get the value of the data. It probably is 99, it probably is 0, so and so. So you can actually get much more informative alert on your side. Row count is failed due to value being X and Y, right? The next step is to actually provide testing at the column. Right, so I want to actually create number of orders. So for example, let me go back to this custom SQL metric, total orders per day, and that can be viewable here. And you can create a test saying that total orders per day should always be greater than 10 and never be less than 5 or something like that, some and condition, right? So that will again check whenever the profile runs. You can actually define the schedule as well, how often you want to run that check. And if that check fails, it will send an alert. It will mark the test as failed at the time. So you will get a time series fashion of looking at this test as well as getting alerts in real time when this test runs and get notified if something failed. And the next thing is I want to point out here is I'm defining two different metrics. For example, in this case, I'm defining total orders per day and total sale amount per day. And you can create a test saying that total orders per day should be greater than 10 and total sale amount per day should be greater than, let's say, $200. So it's an in relation test that you're creating between two metrics that you collected. So the flexibility here will also offer you to kind of query, I am at the orders table, sorry, I'm at the customers table, but I can query, let's say, sales table and create a metric for customers in the context of customers and create a test for that. So you're not just creating tests around the customer's data, but in a business context, customers table is joined with sales table for your dashboard or for your reporting. And you want to make sure the data that you're using in these dashboards or reports is absolute quality, and you can create an expression between these two by generating the SQL statement. And we'll compare those values and give a test success or failure, and again give the reasons why it failed, why it succeeded, all the data that will be available within the UI as well as an event that gets notified to you.
It's pretty cool.
So this will be the initial thoughts that we're going to do. So the idea here is to make sure few things, the ability for anyone using OpenMetadata to be able to use the entire thingy as a product and build test and run test and get notified and define the metrics and whatnot. Similarly, if you have your own homegrown tooling, if you're using some other testing framework, you would be able to publish those tests here as well as the results. And then it's easy to define those same metrics, and we'll be able to send notifications, events based on the statuses of those tests.
So Arsha, there's a question for you. For big tables, could we provide a sample ratio
Yes.
so that the test does not run on all the data?
Yeah. So when you're defining, we will evolve this, add more details. So you can actually define, I don't want to run this across entire table. Yeah, one thing we're going to do here is the partitioning key, adding a partitioning key so that you can enable tests only for that particular partition. For example, the test run today, I can look at a previous day's partition, assuming that partition is already done, and you can run the test only on that partition. Now, if you look at the time series fashion, each day you will get that particular day's partition test results associated with on that time. And the next actual question to address, you can also say that, hey, I don't want to actually look at all the data. I want to look at my 10% of table or 5% of the table data. And we will only run the profiling on that percentage. Please add these comments so that, it'll be good to have some relation of
comments, questions. any of that?
Yeah. I think there's one more.
Any other questions?
Is it possible to enrich the time series with events like deployment of ETL in production? Alberto, do you mind expanding on that one?
Yes, this is something that I have seen in APIs. And usually when you have the time series that is measuring the response time of your API, you can enrich the information on the screen with specific events about the continuous delivery. Like we have updated this API from version 1.0 to 1.1. And this helps the SRE team to figure out what could be the root cause if there is a performance issue. And I was thinking maybe with the data quality, we could have some analogies.
Yeah, so data quality that we are talking right now in the context of only the quality metrics, but we have a bigger plans. We want to
Like it's only about the data content.
Yeah.
Correct?
Okay.
So there will be more stuff coming in data quality in the next releases as well as we continue our journey. One of the aspects that we want to build is the standard metrics, not metrics per se, standard quality checks like freshness, completeness, consistency of the ETL jobs across the data centers, so and so. So there are industry standards that we want to kind of bring in as well. But as
Harsha, I think this is a very valid point. So now we have one level of measurement. How is the data quality? How is it doing through our tests and metrics and all of that? Then on top of it, you can overlay. Here is how the data quality was over a period of time. Suddenly data quality has worsened. And so now you can build a map back into, did we recently change the ETL pipeline that was producing it, right? Is there a new version of it? So now you can overlay a sequence of events on top of it saying, okay, so the data quality is like this, and suddenly there is change in the data quality, and maybe there is also a corresponding ETL version update, as an example.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool stuff.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So add that to Alberto into the issue so that we can track it. So that's where the lineage will come into play as a table.
I mean, and this could be, need not be just on this data set that you're measuring, right? Maybe somewhere upstream something has changed, and that has caused this data set to worsen, even though its pipeline and version hasn't changed and things like that. So there are interesting lineage and other events that can be tied into the observations that is being made to for explainability.
Yeah, like schema change, like for example, price now. For some reason, integer to string, and suddenly we got all the tests failing. So yeah,
correct.
Yeah, but definitely, I think we, as a first step, we feel like this will add really interesting aspects into open metadata. So we are not looking at the a lot of things in 0.9, but at least enabling this will allow users to kind of start creating alerts or conditions and stuff like that. So we believe it will be help quite a bit. So any questions or anything feature requests, please ask us or continue to update the issue there. We'll take a look and we kind of put them in roadmap and continue to execute on them. All right. So if there are no questions, we can quickly jump into glossary. Suresh, do you want to take this up?
Yeah, so Harsha, as you are showing this, can you go to our sandbox? So when we, based on our experience of building open, metadata systems in the past, go to tags. What we decided was we will not have uncontrolled, informal, free-flowing tags, right? So from that perspective, we now have two kinds of tag categories. If you look at personal data, it's a tag category, and then it has two tags called personal and special category. Similarly, we have another type of tag category called user. If you look at user, these are called descriptive tags, right? So these are not used for classification, but these are used for describing either an entity or certain aspects of an entity. For example, you can say take a user tag category and the tag under it date of birth, and add this tag to describe your column more. So our tags work as a way to add additional context and information to any metadata entities. And then these are used for searching and indexing, and of course, right, adding additional meaning to the metadata that already exists, right? So that's how we are using it. And where we are going is business glossaries are very important, right? So business glossaries have wide range of users. One is business glossaries actually define all the terms that are used within an organization. Even the same term that is differently defined or differently used between different parts of the organization. All of these things are typically defined in a central place, and this is useful for making sure that everybody is speaking the same language. So this is a way of building a controlled vocabulary within an organization to establish consistent meaning to terms and common, and establish common understanding. So, um, so uh, glossaries are used for defining all the terms and then defining, turning it into a controlled vocabulary for common understanding. Then the glossaries themselves can also be used as tags. So you can use that to tag the data. You can use it within your description where you are saying, let's say, revenue per user, right? A term. Instead of in the description just using the term revenue per user, you should be able to actually point it to a glossary. The revenue per user should be a glossary term that people can click and look at the definition. So, where I'm getting at is, even though we have tag categories, glossaries have a lot more context that they establish in terms of defining a technical term, common understanding. There can be description, there can be definition, there can be related terms. There can be subtle differences between the same term in different parts of the organization. So they're a lot rich in terms of the metadata value that they provide. So we are planning to add, in addition to tags that we have, we will add glossaries. Glossaries by themselves as a set of terms are useful, but then they can also be used as tags. They can also be used as parts of your description and things like that. That is what the goal of glossary would be. And Harsha, you're showing the marks. And Harsha is on a roll building mocks. So, so here is a mock that he has built where all the terms that are in a business glossary are available here. And then we didn't want to. There is a user, there's a community member who had added some functionality in OpenMetadata. It's a pending patch. He added something called thesauri. Right. So I will actually I'll do a comprehensive write-up on different controlled vocabularies that are available out there, all the way from just a list of terms to, thesauri. The idea of, thesauri as a business glossary is the terms are hierarchical in nature. So you can actually have, terms not just as a list of, A to Z terms, but instead you can have a term and then a child term that is related in, some way of, this term is a broader, concept of another term, or a narrower concept of another term. So that's one thing that is used in thesauri. And then there are also relationship, right? This term is equivalent to this term. This term is similar to this. This term is relevant when, for another term. There are different kinds of relationship that exist. So those are things that we will add as business glossary. And here is, those terms organized as a hierarchical list, right? So you have customers under which you can have, the terms that are that are grouped under customers that are similar in some fashion, right? And so department is a set of terms that are related to department. So that is sort of where we are going. And you should be able to define the term. You should be able to use that term as a tag or a part of the description, as a link. And then you can add various relationship within your organization. Now, here is a place where you will need, set of people who are curating this or who are responsible for agreeing and accepting these terms. So we will also have some kind of a proposal and approval process for business glossary, so that it can be adopted. And then there are some experts related to these glossary terms and things like that, all of those things that we'll add. So that's the feature that is coming along. Here are the, marks. And then we'll also show you, another way of searching for your data, right? A lot of people are coming with keyword terms, and then, they're looking at keywords like customer. Perhaps customer is a term that you have in your business glossary. And if you have used this glossary in relationship with any data pipeline or any other data asset, you will be able to discover all the assets that are related to a concept called clothing here. So Harsha has done a great job in the markup, but he is adding dim address to clothing. I'm not sure about that, Harsha. But anyway, so you see the point that now you have conceptual way of, you are looking for concepts, you understand concepts, and from the concept, you should be able to get at the data assets that are related to that concepts. From the concept, you should be able to get other related concepts defined in your organization. So this is a way of, from the point of, knowledge organization perspective, getting at the data that you have, understanding the data that you have. So that's the goal of business glossary. Any questions? Well, either I was very articulate or I was extremely confusing. So, at least Alberta, you should have one question.
Yeah, what kind of automation can we enable if we have a curated glossary in OpenMetadata?
Yeah, so automation is something that definitely we should look into, starting from something very basic all the way to something, machine learning, AI based. But there are some low-hanging fruit for us, right? For example, if a term, glossary term, customer exists, and there are databases that have descriptions or column names, that or even the table name itself says customer, we could probably come up with some suggestions saying, hey, use this term customer, see if this is relevant to your data, and then use these terms to, reference in your description. Or maybe, we suggest that, the term customer in the description just becomes a link to business glossary as a suggestion. So we could start with some of those things. And the other thing that I also think is every table will be source of some core business concepts, right? So we should have some tag, which is this table, right? Dim address, the core business concept, there could be address, right? So we should be able to add those kind of things. And then not only you see, say for clothing, there are these tables that are relevant, right? Related. Maybe for clothing, you have definitive, tables that provide clothing as a core concept. So there are a lot of those things that we can do. And as always, right, we do in monthly releases, we introduce features iteratively, and then we continue to, build out richer and richer functionality. I think the goal here is to get the metadata. Once you get the metadata, there are like infinite possibilities of building features. So we'll continue to do that.
I think there is a couple of questions. One is in the term description, could we put SQL snippet and that will be highlighted? And
so you are talking about the glossary description, right? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you guys a set of additional metadata that are going to be there as part of glossary. So I'll give you there's a rich set of vocabulary that is captured in the industry. Of course, right? They are very hard for regular people to understand, but there are things like this is similar to this is related to this is computed using this. So there are all those metadata that we can add. And so some of the glossary terms, like for example, total revenue per user, right? might require some kind of a formula. And then if people want to put certain formulas there, definitely we can do that. Does that answer the question that you are getting at? Adding, some kind of, how it is measured, how it is calculated kind of stuff. And then the other question is, what other types could we have? What could you add more details on that? Guys, you can just speak on, we have, very few people, so you can ask this question, directly. So, Hedam, the question is, what are other types could we have? Give us an example. Oh, the type term. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm thinking, there could be type term. If you want, there could be type formula. Now we have an entity called metrics, and the whole idea of metrics was it measures certain things, and there is description, and then there are tables where it is measured from, and there is a formula. And so now the question is, we have that metrics entity. Should it be captured in business glossary or not? It's something that we need to think through. I will, ask you guys, how would you like to see it? So I was thinking a type could be formula. Those are two things that I've thought of. Because we are using tags already for classification. If we had not used the tags for classification, we could have also a type called classification in business glossary, right? So we'll see how this pans out. And I'm just thinking perhaps maybe business glossary and tags are not so different that maybe we merge it. Like for example, some companies use tags where there is user generated unmanaged tags, and then the managed tags are called as business glossary tags. So this is a dilemma sort of I'm like mulling over and not coming to a clear thought process on how to move forward. I'll propose some of these things in this, and you guys provide feedback. So those were the examples I had. The types are a term that is defined. Classification, term could be a specialization, and then a formula could be another thing. Those are kinds of things. And then possibly you can have some kind of run books and things like that. So possibilities are endless, and we'll evolve it slowly. What other question? Can we follow terms to be alerted on can we follow terms to be alerted on all its entities? Pere, what does you mean suggestion? No, can we follow terms? Oh, okay, got it. Follow terms. Like what kind of alerts would we see related to terms, following terms? When the term changes, when it gets updated, you get notified?
Well, I was actually thinking something more like if we can actually group entities under terms. So instead of needing to follow all of the entities, say, I'm just interested in anything about clothing, and I want to kind of automatically follow everything that falls okay. Behind.
Got it. So I'm interested in this concept clothing, right? Or let's say I'm a marketing guy, branding, right? And all the data related to that, entity related to that, I should be able to follow them. Got it. Okay, that's a great idea. So I'll just write it down.
Thanks.
I think it's very
follow a concept, right?
To the idea of the data mesh, that you have domains and you're interested in specific domains. Yeah, makes sense to me too.
So in fact, I was also thinking domains as tags, okay, in OpenMetadata. Now, tags are very similar to glossary. And so, we need to think about how we want to do domains. So again, it's a core, so essentially what Pere is saying is there is some way of grouping certain things based on concepts, and concepts are of interest to people. So following a concept, can I, through that relationship, follow all the hard things that are tagged or that come under the concept? So definitely something to look into. So then there was a question of, would it be possible to do a one-time import of glossary terms from an import file, say CSV? We currently have, yes, definitely we will support this. So there are two things that we are doing right now. Jamie. One is today when we ingest metadata into OpenMetadata, there are people who might be using already tags in BigQuery. You might be having tags in, let's say, Airflow, tags in another system, and each of those tags are evolved differently at different timelines, controlled by different people. And hence, maybe same tag is defined twice, maybe same tag is called two different things, maybe the same thing refers to two different meanings, and all of those things that are there, right? So what we are going to do for just tags alone there, and then I'll come back to glossary. Tags alone there, when you actually import metadata from any system, we today are capturing the metadata from, tag metadata from that system and creating, Harsha, if you go to our tags categories, we are creating automatically we are creating, go to tags. Yep. So just like these tag categories are there, let's say you have a BigQuery XYZ system. That is a service you have defined in our OpenMetadata. When you ingest metadata from that, automatically we'll create a tag category called BigQuery XYZ, the service name, under which all the tags we saw while importing will be defined, right? And then what we will give you is a way of this BigQuery, tag T1 actually maps to your standard vocabulary that you have built in OpenMetadata tag T2. So that way, now from different systems, you are getting all these different tags, but you can standardize them and OpenMetadata tags. Similarly, we will for glossaries, not only we will allow you to import from CSV, possibly import it from some industry standards, refer to some of the industry standards from our glossaries. As a lot of these industry standards that are available that have defined these terms. So one, you should be able to import your existing glossaries. Two, if you have other systems where you have different glossary of terms, you should be able to import it and then map it back to OpenMetadata standard vocabulary. And then eventually, if you want to get rid of those guys, you should be able to get rid of those guys and just start using the standard vocabulary that tag and glossary that you have in other systems as well. So that's the third phase. Those are things that we will add support for. I mean, of course, right, you are in banking industry, there are a lot of banking glossaries and technical terms. You are in healthcare industry, there are already healthcare.gov has many terms that are defined. You should just be freely pointing to that, and that is a good way of not only establishing consistent vocabulary within your organization, but also with your counterparts in your industry, right? Where now you can actually share information with them. And when you are saying X, they also are saying the same thing or meaning the same thing. So those are things that we would allow. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So that is those are the exciting features that we are working on. So please do, look at some of these issues. Collectively, all of us can represent various concerns associated with some of these capabilities, and you guys providing comments, feedback, even feedback saying this makes sense is a good feedback. A feedback where it says this doesn't make sense is a better feedback, and then a feedback which says you are missing this completely is an awesome feedback. So please do provide any of those feedbacks.
Also, we have the good first issues for anybody who wants to join the development of OpenMetadata. So these are very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, a couple of things. Good first issues. We sent out a survey. We promise we won't bother you too much, but it's good to understand how the community is doing with our product and get your feedback. So please do fill our survey. And then finally, let's continue the awesome momentum we have as a project. If you have not started our project, go start it. Go tell your friends to start it. Go tell your friends to look at this. Our project. We want to continue to have this great momentum we have had so far and build on it. And we want to build, the best metadata system that is out there with your help. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks everyone, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys, bye.